After the Reformation, the chancel was walled up, and it's thought as a direct snub to the Roman Catholics. Women were introduced into the great hospital and were put into the chancel of the church.
Right, and this was split into 2 levels?
It was split into 2 levels at that time, yes.
Right, and it was women only, and this is where they lived and ate and were nursed.
It was. They were nursed here by lay women who looked after them and tended to them.
When you come into the Eagle Ward, you immediately see why it's called the Eagle Ward. What is the history behind all of these eagles on the ceiling? Okay,
it's dominated, of course, by the ceiling, and that's why it's called Eagle Ward. 252 eagles, painted in 1383 in honour of Anne of Bohemia. She was the queen of Richard II, and she visited the great hospital with Richard II in that year.
And the eagle, therefore, was the standard of Bohemia?
Yeah, the emblem of Bohemia. Of Bohemia. Originally, there were just beds by the side of the walls. Gradually, cubicles were introduced. Well, Chris, this is inside the cubicles. They're Victorian. Initially, they would have had one of these cubicles. You can see now they've been split into 2. It was to give the inmates or the residents more room to live. So there was a sleeping quarter and a small lounge area.
Right. And then they would go into the snug if they wanted to.
And if they had visitors, they would go into one of the snuggeries at the end of the ward, where they would light a fire and it would be very warm and cosy. Hence the term snuggeries.
And they would eat in this particular area?
Yeah, no, they tended to eat communally in the centre of the ward. Eagle Ward was last used in about 1979, 980. And people did not want to leave here. There were fabulous new flats on the other side of the site. But I think such was the community spirit in here that people found it very difficult to leave.
Right. So as we look around this room, or rooms today, this cubicle, this is how it looked in 1980?
This is pretty much how it looked in 1980 and how people lived. Not much privacy.
And this is a beautiful little cloister. I understand it's the smallest in England, is that right?
It is said to be the smallest in England, as opposed to the cathedral just over the road, which is of course the largest.
So Norwich has largest and the smallest,
Correct.
Is it?
They were built in 1450, a fairly standard cloister layout, apart from the fact they're on the north side of the church.
The priests, the monks, they would have, very much like at Norwich Cathedral cloisters, would have used this as a place of meditation and of prayer, is that
They
right?
would. They lived, the 4 priests that were established here in the 1200s lived on in the master's house, which wasn't there at the time, but this was a later addition, as I say, in the 1400s.
The stonework is still fabulous, isn't it, even 600 years later?
It is.
It's absolutely gorgeous. And obviously an attractive little garden as well. Is that some of the residents?
No, that's done by our gardeners, our contract gardeners. It was at one point a burial ground, one assumes, for the monks and priests that were living here.
Well, it's a beautiful spot, all here in the shadow of our wonderful cathedral. I thank you very much indeed for your time.
It's been my great pleasure. Thank you very much for coming. Bye now.